Hey, how you doing? This is Rayo, and one of the purposes of this current video is to address some recent concerns. I received some calls from help from several people from Wake County recently, and also I've been undergoing some things with EEOC with reference to Wake County. Please forgive the way I look. I've been working on outside in the car and got some bags around my eyes and so forth. Anyway, continuing. Um, it is interesting when you get hired for a position. You know, the ones who make the laws in our state, in our country, the legislature, they're the ones who do it. And various agencies have been established to go ahead and say, hey, look, for example, a nurse needs to have a license to practice. Doctor, law enforcement has to have law enforcement capabilities outlined, arrest powers and so forth outlined in our state constitution and the Constitution of the United States, etc. And usually agencies will go ahead and like DHSS and go ahead and do the regulations in terms of the regulations in terms of what your license can let you do, cannot let you do, the do's and the don'ts and so forth. That's what those regulatory government agencies are for. Here's the thing: is that if I get hired, for example, to intake people at a housing program, I intake people or provide case management services. Get a job description, and that outlines my duties, and I make a contract and say, hey, look, this is what I agreed to do. This is what your position says I can do. Um, and you go ahead and get hired, and you know what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. But here's the thing: is that a lot of these agencies, departments of the state, so forth, or the city or the county, they're short money. So the ingenious thing to do is, I'm going to hire you to answer the phones, but I'm going to then require that you help this person get housing and stuff like this. These are examples. To get housing, and you're going to transport this person to get housing, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, here's the thing: if it's not in your job description and you expand the powers, then you basically breach the contract as an employer, and then you also are oftentimes breaking state and city law and so forth. Because, for example, um, trans, let's say medical aspects of a profession are usually outlined again. Your capabilities, your specialized training, not only that, your specialized education allows you to identify, for example, when a person is having diabetic coma, or when a person is going through health distress. And so that support staff should be at, for example, at a housing program and or at a shelter or whatever, to be there to provide the additional supports for the intake workers, or the housing worker that has been assigned case management as some sort of supported scattered site housing. And so that's supposed to be there. Now, support staff also, there's special transportation requirements. If a county has a fleet of vehicles, you purchase the vehicles as a county. You should have one with a wheelchair accessible component to it, wherein you could get wheelchair clients in and out. If one of your contracted, positions is to go ahead and transport, or whatever you contracted with the state or federal government was, you'll provide transport. Well, then, if you have vehicles, one should be wheelchair accessible, have a wheelchair van, whatever. Not only that, is that the person driving the vehicle, the specialized transportation worker, should have specialized training to deal with people in fragile conditions to transport them. That's it. Um, and so, as human resources, as local management, administrative staff, you shouldn't be allowed to get around state, federal, and city ordinances or laws or regulations by saying, well, I'm going to hire this person to do intake, but I'm going to have them now do search and seizure of persons who bring drugs on the premises. As you know, that I've encountered, law enforcement specialized training. They go through the extra training. They have the equipment so they can find out what is cocaine, meth, weed, put in a little baggie, test it, whatever, confiscate, arrest. That's their capability, law enforcement. So when you take a case manager and say, hey, look, I want you to search and seize. Well, first of all, under state, city, federal laws, oftentimes this person doesn't have the power to do those things because the state government or whatever government has said those people need to have specialized training, just like a person can't practice law without a legal degree. That's what, and if you do it, you can get arrested, especially here in the state of North Carolina. So you practice law without a degree, you can get arrested. If you confiscate illegal drugs without a degree, you can get arrested without the specialized enforcement powers, without the title. And if you transport disabled people, that's a regular function of your position, but quote unquote, it was an outline when you got hired, then it's the burden on the county who broke the law to not have that as a cause to dismiss you. You asked me to transport. It wasn't in my hiring description. I did it because I went ahead and felt pressured. As a result, I transported people. Somebody gets hurt. And then you blame me and you want to fire me. Well, I wasn't supposed to be transporting anyway. Or I'm working with a client, going to take them to see a house. Clientele doesn't tell me that they're experiencing medical distress. I'm not trained. I don't have that licensing. You didn't have, before you asked me to transport that client, you didn't ask them to say, hey, look, are you okay? Well, there's no medical assessment that transpired to say they were transportable. I mean, and that's the crazy part, because some people are not transportable. They require specialized transportation because of the fact, for example, they can have a seizure at any time. Do you want someone that can have a seizure at any time in your car? Even if it's a county vehicle? No. You want someone specially trained to deal with that scenario, to transport people like that. That's what medical transport people are there for. That's what the Medicaid system, that's what the Wake to Go and all the other stuff is there for, because those people receive specialized training. So the main point is this, is that one of the calls for help recently is that a person who was asked to do stuff outside of their scope of their duties, outside of their job description, county turns around and terminates that person, or tries to, or is in process of terminating that person. But the biggest thing is, for another example, is this, that one of the biggest, my pet peeves is this, is that you can't communicate a threat against a government employee. So if you work at different facilities, hospitals, supported housing, uh, corrections or place, whatever, when you communicate a threat towards that person, well, you can get arrested. You can get criminally charged. But when you ask employees to say, "Oh, we have low barrier now. We have to accept that," you can't do that because you don't have the capacity to legislate. That's the legislator, whatever you say. That's that group of people who legislate, who come up with the laws, who says you can do X, Y, and Z. You can do X, Y, and Z. This is our law with regards to drugs, with regards to criminal acts and so forth. So if the law says don't communicate a threat against government employee, how is it as an employer, once the government employee has received a threat, that you go back and say, well, we don't want you to exercise your right, statutory right? Well, as an administrator in a building, in a program, you can't really undo that. That one of my biggest thing also was, the biggest thing was grandfathered in. You have a shelter that's within 200 feet of a family center serving families, wherein just do sex offender registry search. You know that there's over 17 people, 10 people, 12 people, whatever, even one person that uses that center that's a sex offender, but it's housed right within 200 feet of a family center. Why would you even do that? It's a lack of knowledge. That's just no. You can make that probably another component of the shelter. Oak City in particular is what I'm talking about. Another component of the shelter center, whatever you call it, and have it like the women's center right next door, shelter next door, where they can have their merry way. Here's the other thing: is that one of the things that often used to come up, they wanted to get rid of law enforcement out of certain programs because law enforcement was looking up people's records and arresting people. So if you came into the shelter, they would look you up and say, "Hey, this guy's got an open warrant." Well, here's the thing: this is the liberals versus the young liberals, which is the psychoticness of this all. When I worked, for example, at a shelter, we did our darndest to make sure it was safe for everyone to use, not just employees. So if we saw drugs or we knew the person was under warrant, I say, yeah, arrest them. Yeah, look them up. Because you don't want someone who's fleeing the law to be a threat to another human being who just by some sort of circumstance became homeless. So why have a safe haven in a homeless shelter by lowering the barriers so that they can use drugs in your facility, so that they go ahead and hide in your facility from law enforcement? I say bring the police back to the shelter, but limit their access to HIPAA information, drug information, and so forth. Yes, I do believe that. I believe it should be a separate computer system for the law enforcement, wherein it's not readily accessible, that they can look you up, but at the same time, if they ask your name, ID, and by chance, they should be there to be able to look up, for safety reasons. So if someone, let's say, start to fight in the shelter, right? They start arguing or they come in high and start belligerent and start being a threat to the other. But that's when a law enforcement officer or someone should be able to look up the person's history and say, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be here anyway because you're a fleeing felon anyway, etc., etc. So in other words, if you have the audacity to use public places as shelter, you should know that you'll possibly be looked up if you're going to go ahead and create a scene, create a disturbance, become a threat to others. That's my 2 cents, and that's totally in line with public policy. It's a public policy stance. It's our laws, city, state, federal. And when you have employees who lose their positions because you asked them to do something that they wasn't supposed to do, or you're asking them to not follow statutory language, you got a problem as an HR entity. These are state, city, county employees that are putting their lives at risk. And if someone threatens me to go ahead and shoot me, well, dang, have that person arrested and escorted out of the building. Perfect right. So, these are the things. It came up recently. I have an EEOC complaint going on. The other thing is this: a basic thing is this: is that what ends up happening is this: is that things are obvious, prima facie case. So if I'm in your facility, or near your facility, or drive by your facility, and it's shifts change, and I'm waiting there to see how many wheelchair people with badges, employees with badges come, I see none. Well, then that's quite obvious that you don't hire people with physical disabilities. If I'm there for a job interview and I've been there for 2 hours, came early, and I asked the front desk, is there anybody that works here that has a wheelchair? I said, no. Not that works here. No, not that I know of. I don't have to dig much further to know you have a discriminatory hiring practice. Not only that, it's Wake County's publishing all these little videos, the little TikTok type videos. They just had a video of a new health van. And I could look at the van and I say, look, that's not wheelchair accessible. So you got a mobile health clinic that I know I can't get a wheelchair into. I'm looking at the thing, like, then this chick who's overweight, who looks like she got diabetes, looks like maybe a county employee, I would hope not, who's advertising this whole new bus, mobile clinic, whatever. And I'm looking at it and like, dude, first of all, I don't think the thing is even accessible. Why'd you even have such a thing without a ramp in the back? Don't know why. Cause how you gonna test someone? What are you gonna do? Test their blood outside? I mean, or check their blood pressure outside the van. Pull up somewhere and set up a tent. I don't know how they gonna do that, but whatever. It's like it's an interesting concept because when I worked at the shelter or at the county, I asked, well, you have all these county vehicles, and I don't see one whether it's accessible for a person with an employee with a disability. I didn't see it. I asked about it while I was there. Didn't see it. And that was like 2002 to 2005. Now we're in 2025. Same problem goes on. You have a fleet of vehicles that not even a disabled employee can drive, but you take care of that problem by not hiring disabled people. You don't hire disabled people, so you don't have to worry about disabled people driving or transporting. That's tough. This is the icing on the cake type stuff. 2025 is like, it's purely obvious. I've said stuff all along since 2015 was when I officially did the push for open and competitive hiring. And it's now 2024. 25, I mean. And it's still not happening. It's interesting. And this is a message to HR. Oh, one of the obvious things also that came up is that if I applied for a position and you hired someone else, and they have a LinkedIn profile, and I'm able to look at their qualifications and say, hell, they're not even remotely as qualified as I was, then pretty obvious you're discriminating. You're letting, you know, pretty obvious then and there. Um, I'm hoping this helps, and I don't like this freedom, this whole certain things about Trump that I agree with. I tell you the truth, and we have too much of a give society where we just give everything away, tax dollars. But these are county positions, state positions, city positions, are tax paid positions. That means the taxpayer was taxed, paid their taxes to fund those positions. How are you going to use those positions then to discriminate against the very taxpayer that funded those positions? I don't understand. How is it that you can not have open and competitive hiring in 2025 and have individually assigned administrators do the hiring decisions who just want to hire their friends? How is it? And it's pretty blatant and obvious when you look at these facilities. And the blackness. Oh my God! I just went for an interview in May. Totally black. Totally black in a majority black building, social services. And the second interview in that same time felt the same way. It's like, dude, I remember when I went on job interviews and you had diversity. Now you go on job interviews, certain race, majority female, certain race that are present most of the time. And there's just 2 interviews, by the way, that I've been to lately, Wayne County positions. So it's just phenomenal in terms of like when you look at who gets hired, who walks to the building in the morning, and you're like, they're a certain race. It's obvious. Then obviously no one with a disability works there. So hope this helps. Again, the expansion of job duties beyond what was hired for. So you get to hire an office worker and they become your law enforcement, they become everything for you, your transportation person. You're violating the law, but also not only that, you're putting these people in jeopardy, both the persons that are served and the persons that are serving, because they don't have the qualifications to really do what you're asking them to do, specialized training. And it's a recipe for disaster, and you shouldn't have the right to terminate someone thereafter for those reasons. Hope this helps. This is just political. My degree is political science. I focused on policy. And so, well, how do you get the right to say something? That was my education and training. Sociology was also knowing the dynamics of our society, composition, the laws, and so forth. Sociology, along with political science, yeah, it gives me a right to comment. I have a master's in political science. Hello? And so I can sort of have the 2 cents to go ahead and look at your laws and look at how they're being implemented and say, hey, look, in your policies and practices, to say, look, something's wrong. That doesn't mean that I'm psychotic or loco or just don't know what the hell I'm talking about. No, that means that I'm looking from an objective point of view, and you can't fire me, quote unquote, so I can comment without the retribution. And if people come to me wanting me to comment, telling me their stories to, memorialize what they're going through, I'll do it. That's what they come to me for. That's what the recent phone call was for. Someone said, hey, look, the nicest person in the whole wide world was taken advantage of. And she would serve anybody and do anything for everybody. But yet and still facing termination over some idiotic action by the county. Hope this helps.